Guys, you have a new film that's coming out shortly, The Sky is Pink. There's a lot of excitement about this film. There's a lot of interest in this film. It tells the story of Aisha Chaudhary, an extraordinary 18-year-old girl who passed from pulmonary fibrosis, but she insisted on living her life to the fullest in that brief lifetime. It's also about family, it's especially her parents, and how that affects their own relationship and relationships with others. So it is about love, it is about loss. It also seems from the trailer, and that's all we've seen so far, that it's also life affirming. The tone on some level is about living life to the fullest. You've, Shonali, said that it was very personal, of course. You've lived through what Aisha's parents lived through. What was it for each of you specifically that spoke to you when this came along?
For me, I was very inspired by Aisha's parents. So they had approached me to tell the story, actually about their daughter.
They said apparently that they would only give you the rights to tell that story. You were the only filmmaker.
In a certain sense, it was her dying wish to watch Margarita with a straw. She had watched the trailer. So that sort of made it very special for me also and for them. And I guess because I was a filmmaker who had lost a child, they felt it was safe. You know, such a delicate subject. But when I heard everything, I said, I don't want to make a film about Aisha Chaudhary, your daughter. I don't want to make a film about a teenager who faces death and is courageous. I am inspired by your love story, that you fell in love when you were just 16 in school, and here you are past 50, having lost a child, and still so connected to each other. I found it really moving and touching, other than the whole aspect of, it came from all of them actually, not just Aisha, this thing of living life to the fullest, like every moment counting. So these are the things what spoke to me when I started writing the script.
Sure. For the rest of you?
Sid, please. We'll go in order of appearance onto the project.
That's true. Well, when I saw Shonali's last film, Margarita with a Straw, I remember leaving the screening like completely like shattered in a sense.
He sobbed in my arms.
And I couldn't really speak for a while after that. And I knew I'd love to work with her on something. And we pursued her and we asked her to share the next script that she was working on. And she came to us with The Sky is Pink. And I think the moment that I read it, I just knew that, you know, this film had to be made. And, you know, called Shonali, and that's when the ball got rolling. Like Shonali said, I think what spoke to me, of course, is the story of the family, but you know, most importantly, the love story between this couple, where they were able to live through what they did and still be connected and still be together, which a lot of couples can't be once you go through, you know, situation like that.
Right? That about 70% or
if not more,
probably
marriages break
up
after
don't make it through. So that was really inspiring, and I think for anyone who's been in a relationship, when you see a couple who's been together, like Shonali said, from the age of 16, and has managed to tide through life's, you know, situations, ups and downs, and still stay together, that I think is very life affirming.
Right.
I guess that's me now. I was looking at what film I wanted to do in India, and I hadn't done one in 3 years, and I was really craving it. I always have a little bit of a lateral thought when I think about the kind of things that I want to do. I need it to be special, I need it to be an immersive experience. So Reshma, my manager, who never ever actually says, you know, you should talk about this film. She's not someone, she lets me make my choices. She was just like, just read it. I just want you to read it. So it came to me while I was in New York. I remember sitting in my apartment one evening and I was like, all right, let me just read this movie. And I couldn't stop. And I just couldn't stop. And it was over, and I sat down, and I remember I was alone and I was looking at the city lights, and I just remembered what it's like for caretakers. When my father was unwell for about 8 years, what my mom went through, what we felt, the emotions that we felt. It was so visceral in that script when I read it. Like it took me back instantly, and it took me a second to remember that no one actually remembers the caretakers. We don't, what happens to a marriage? What happens to a relationship? What happens to you as a human being when you see the deterioration of someone that you love so much to something you can't help, and the helplessness of it. But you're trying to do everything, and my character, Aditi, in real life is a ferociously protective mother. And I thought that if I ever was in a situation like that, that's the kind of mom I would want to be. And I just knew that next moment I texted Sid, I spoke to Reshma, and I was like, you were right, like, I need to meet Shonali. I've never seen any of her work till date. I just met her, and knew that this is a filmmaker I trust myself as an actor with, because she was so clear. She knew what she wanted you to feel. The intention of what the audience would come out with was so crystal clear. The first day we met until right now, and I'm a very director's actor. I relied tremendously on my director, and I just knew she was someone I could do that with.
Actually, Sid called me and said that there's a script that he'd like me to read, which Shonali was directing. I had seen Margarita with the Straw and I absolutely loved it. My head at that point was very into this album that I was making, which we discussed on another time when we had spoken. So I told him I'm actually off to Europe to do some recordings and stuff, and I'll come back and I'll meet you then. And he was gracious enough to say yeah. And then Reshma, actually, who Priyanka just mentioned, called me after that, and she said, listen, I know you're going and you've spoken to Sid and you said you'll come back, but I really think you should hear it now or read it now before you go, because it's really special and I don't want them to like maybe think you're not interested and move on. And then she got Zoya involved in this, and Zoya also called me and said the same thing. So I said, okay.
We were plotting.
Yeah, it seems like
Reshma,
so then
the behind the scenes video.
Zoya and
We'll show you the
Reshma called me and
BTS
said,
after.
please read it. Then I spoke to Sid and he sent me the script to read. I read it, and pretty much like Priyanka just mentioned, I was in it from the word go. I could feel everything that the characters were feeling. I was laughing, I was finding myself like teary-eyed. And the fact that it's true, which is the history of the story, that I did know that it's based on a real life couple and a family. All of it just made me, it felt like a very important film because it spoke about big things and little things at the same time.
Right.
You know, which is not an easy thing to do in a film. You know, like there are larger ideas at times that you play out to, then they're like you just work with nuances, but it has everything in it. And pretty much the next day we met, Shonali, Sid and myself. We met and I told them that I'd absolutely love to do it. And that's really how it all kind of came together for me.
I mean, to me, just to add, there was also a massive comfort. Like I was feeling very pressured about the fact that this is going to be the first one that I'm doing after a few years, and like I was a little nervous, but like Sid and Ronnie and me have done about 5-6 films together. There's such a comfort in knowing that I'm working with filmmakers or co-producing with filmmakers that know how to make amazing films, that have the sensibility of making cinema that I want to watch. So you feel protected, and there was such a sense of feeling protected in this movie from the beginning to the end.
But weren't you also planning your wedding at the time, which is a very different kind of mood and space to be in, and you know, you were getting into playing a mother who loses her child. Was that just hard? I mean, to be in a very different place in your head.
I mean, the irony of it was crazy. As healing of a process as this film was for me, it was also extremely, it evoked emotions that I didn't want at that time, and which I carried with me, or I didn't know how to handle at that time. I was really immensely missing my father. I shot this movie till about 4 days before my wedding, and just knowing that my dad wouldn't be there at my wedding, and the feelings of loss anyway being like really, you know, up top on my mind, and then to play a character like that, it was extremely tough. I mean, I don't think it would have been possible if, like all of them sitting here, like Farhan being patient enough to say, all right, she's sitting in this room which had been created by them while we were filming, which was my wedding approvals room, where like all my caterers and all of those people would come and sit here, FaceTiming with Nick while he was over there.
I had no idea. They were telling me that she's working on a scene. I was like, wow, man, that's like
Shut
serious
up,
stuff.
you knew.
I felt so like inept.
cheated
I
now?
felt inept as an actor. I'm like, I don't do all this stuff. They're like, she's
getting
she's
into
not going to be
character.
disturbed. She's getting into character right
like
now.
a
working on
panic
this.
room that
She was selecting clothes and like catering.
Cake. She's probably eating a lot of cake in the back.
Just selecting clothes, just
What a
selecting
revelation on your show.
Joda. Shut up. But like they were, you knew, they were also like gracious about it and understanding about it, patient around it. That it was rough, but again, like I said, it felt like protected.
Did you
She
ever
had
worry?
to leave, by the way. Like we finished shooting a scene. She got on a plane to go to Paris because Ralph Lauren needs an atelier. I had to look up that word. India doesn't have that. So she had to go to Paris for the gown fitting. She had a gorgeous gown, as we all know, with the biggest train anybody's had in the world. She had to go to Paris. Then she came back. She just stopped to pick up some delicious from La Durena
Macarons,
for all of us. So sweet. Like took the time to do that for the whole crew. Came back. straight to set, and had
From
to
the
keep shooting
airport.
to
But
had
did
to
you
challenge
ever-
John.
Did you ever worry? And this is not about. Did you ever worry that is she going to be in the space to be able to pull this off? I would imagine a film like this requires a certain mind space, requires a certain commitment, and it's not about unprofessionalism. It's about headspace. But I mean, was that ever a concern?
So firstly, when we started, like what's beautiful for me, like because I feel like her mother, because my actors are babies for me, like I've seen the growth of this relationship, and then she was getting married. Like
Right.
that's not when I
It
met her in
happens in this
January.
movie.
It all happened under my eyes.
Right. Okay.
So when I met her January 2018,
There was no
she was
Nick.
dating Nick. That's it. Like,
Wow, okay.
and
I
I know
wasn't
because
even dating
yeah,
him.
she was barely.
Okay.
She's a little bit.
I didn't
barely.
even like-
I
he was
saw.
one-
We had some chats. I saw the whole thing blossom.
Right.
And at that time, when I met in January, maybe she, if she was about to get married, would not have said yes to the film, right? Even
Sure.
she had no idea this would happen to her in the same year, that she would fall so deeply in love and want to get married
Right.
in that year, right? So
Right.
when we started off,
Because she famously left another film and they made a big deal about it because
I
you were going to
didn't.
get married. No, not you.
Oh,
you
right.
didn't, of course. Right.
so she was my first choice to play this character. I just wanted her to be Aditi, and I told Sid, this is who I want. So when we met in New York, like there was this deep connection between us and a commitment. So there's absolutely no fear. And then by the time Nick came in, we were many months into it. I didn't even
Right.
have 1 second of worry. Like I
Right.
saw how ferociously committed and hardworking she is. I wasn't at all worried.
You know, to all of you, when you're making a film like this, you're sort of making an unwritten sort of commitment pact with also the people whose life stories these are. Shonali, I would imagine most you, because you're making that commitment first. I mean, were there just no-go areas? Were there things in your head that you knew you wouldn't pander to for the sake of filmmaking, for the sake of making this an attractive film? For y'all, you've played real life characters before. Is this a very different preparation from, aside from the sports, Milka and Mary Kom, but of course that requires physical, I don't mean that, but getting into the headspace of a couple like this, was that important? Did you need to channel them, or did you work with the script?
No, well, it was working with the script mainly. Working also, I mean, there's another unsung hero who's not here with us,
Right.
Nilesh, who did a lot of research and had shot a lot of footage with the actual family, which we did watch. But Shonali didn't want me to really meet with Nirain initially.
Right.
She wanted me to just kind of read about him, watch whatever we could of the footage that we shot, and just kind of imbibe the kind of guy, that he was, and create then somebody out of my own, I guess, imagination and experience with it. And that's really how we approached it at first. And then I met him on the first, within the first week of shooting on set. What was nice to see was that he looked very comfortable watching what he was watching. It's not something you want to go up and ask somebody, is it feeling okay to you?
Right.
Because it's a strange question.
Of course.
But they looked very comfortable and they looked like they were happy being there.
Yeah.
And that was very reassuring.
Right.
For me, it was important actually that I didn't want them to meet the real characters, because I didn't want any sense of having to feel like you want to pick up any nuances or
Right.
imitation
Right.
of them, because firstly they're alive and it's not like they're famous people.
Correct.
What's interesting about it is just an ordinary couple who face extraordinary
Circumstances,
circumstances.
yeah.
So I wanted my actors to bring their own persona to the table with it, and not try to be like Aditi and Nirain.
Sure.
So it's really getting the essence of their character and bringing that. But before Priyanka says about how she felt about Aditi, I just want to say what was amazing is that Aditi Nirain was so emotionally honest and naked with me.
Right.
So in my writing of the script though,
Right.
I was able to really delve deep and give very three-dimensional details to them, because they came so out in the open and said everything,
Right.
I was never going to ever be maudlin or sentimentalized or be melodramatic. They knew that from my aesthetic. So it was never, there was nothing I had to think about, oh, I won't do.
Won't do this. Right. Right. Right.
I mean, like they said, Shonali didn't want us to meet the real Aditi and Nirain, but I elbowed my way in. I was like, please let me just meet her. Obviously, I'm not going to imitate the way she walks or
right,
her
right.
hair or like
Right.
her hands and gestures. I'm not a mother, unlike the people making this film.
Yeah.
I just need to hear her. I just need to. So I flew to London. I went to her apartment. I sat with her all day. I just wanted to understand what it is like to have a child, lose that child, know that child, live with the thought process of that child. And Aditi is very different than Shonali.
Right.
I depended on Shonali tremendously for emotional, like the emotional support for my character, but I needed Aditi's spirit, her spunk, she has this energy when she walks, she has this energy when she talks, and I wanted to channel that. And that was, I try not to be myself in any of the characters that I play, so I needed for her to be holistic. I needed like both these women to be really important. But that was the only time I spent time with her. After that, Shonali put a full stop on it. She was like, no.
Siddharth and Shonali, this is a story that the tone is crucial to any film. This could have been like an In the Bedroom. Of course, it's a very different story, but it is about a couple losing a child and how that affects that relationship. Or it could be the film that you've made. You said just now that you were very clear that you didn't want it to be maudlin and you didn't want it to be melodramatic. And can you talk about that and why that was the tone that you wanted to take? Did you always want to tell a life-affirming story? And would this still have been a film that you were interested in if it was going to talk about, if it was going to be perhaps darker or perhaps just more shattering? And we haven't watched the film. I want to say I'm sure there's a lot in the film that you know, I'm just taking for granted.
Yeah, so who knows how you'll think about it. But for me, I'll just tell you my attitude, like the attitude with which I wrote.
Yeah.
And that came from my own attitude about death. So when I lost Ishan, I was able to immediately actually accept his death, and he helped me with that hugely, you know. And I did a lot of work to grow and grow deeper and deeper into the peace and acceptance of his death. So by the time the script came to me, I was quite excited to write about loss in a positive way, because that's how I felt. It may sound really macabre and strange to people, it will, because losing a child is dreadful.
Right.
But in that dreadfulness, can you find light?
Yeah.
And I found light.
Right.
I found a lot of light. And my life was filled with light. So I wanted to somehow be able to impart that it's not the darkest, deepest despair in the end of the world when you lose somebody, a child or anybody. So that was the attitude that I knew before writing that I was going to bring about. And when I started the very first draft, I came up with this mechanism of having Aisha herself narrate it as a dead girl. So not like a ghost. So I called her Spirit Aisha in the script, but it's not that she's a ghost, but it's her voice. So then I could make her voice be caustic and sardonic.
Correct, because she
about
says
death.
she's the villain of the story.
And and she's dead. She's like, I'm dead.
I think it was the voice of Aisha. I think what's going to surprise many people is how funny the film actually is because of the spirit of this girl. And she's a regular teenager, and so she talks like one. She doesn't look at herself as anything other than that. And she talks about her parents the way a teenager would talk about their parents. And I think that's what really struck me as being the most remarkable thing about this script, that it wasn't, when you look at the subject per se, you might imagine that it's got a certain heavy, dramatic, melodramatic tone, but it was actually the opposite. And that's so refreshing, and that truly is life-affirming. I mean, we say life-affirming very often.
loosely, you're right, yes.
But that's the most life-affirming thing, right? When you don't need to take it as heavily as we would usually do, and you treat it in a way where, like Shonali says, you've got birthdays and you've got death days, and you in a way, if you can celebrate both, then you're celebrating life.
You know, I don't know about you, but I feel like the person we're missing here is Zaira, who's sort of integral to this film. She plays Aisha. What was she like? She's really, we've seen her on screen and she's incredible. Also, she famously decided she doesn't want to act. Did that come as a big surprise? She said her religion doesn't permit her to. How did you all take that in? And have you had conversations with her since?
I've met her since, because we were still needed to do our voiceover, which is integral to the film, and I went to Jammu and we did that and had a blast doing that. We're laughing and doing that. Yeah, and
I don't know if they got any
we just after Toronto, she wanted to hear blow by blow, so she actually flew into Jammu to be able to talk to me and to some others, because there's still a blockade in Kashmir.
And you've written about that on Instagram, how you were worried about.
So she wanted the blow by blow to hear in detail. We all support her completely. She's only 18. She has her whole life ahead of her. And yes, it was a surprise, and she was marvelous. Like, Aisha is so much the spark and spunk of this film, and she was terrific. You know, her energy is amazing. We loved having her on set and working with her. She's really talented.
were you surprised that she doesn't want to act? I mean, you feel like when there's great talent comes along rarely, and then that person doesn't want to work anymore.
I'm a believer of the fact that to each their own.
Sure.
Who are we to
Sure.
decide
Of
and
course.
poke our noses into someone's personal decision?
Sure.
I mean, I think she's an 18-year-old girl that has to decide whatever she wants to do, and that's absolutely her decision. And there's such a power to it.
Right.
You know, just because we are obsessed with films and we think that's the biggest end all and all doesn't mean it has to be for someone else. And
I think all of us unanimously felt just
Yeah.
tremendous love and support, especially I think we were a little concerned, and I managed to speak to her the first, and I reassured that it was her own decision,
right.
and we all support anybody making their own decision. That's what all it is.
Absolutely.
Farhan, you said during a Q&A at the Toronto Film Festival that you spoke of being a conduit for someone else's story. Priyanka, you've said, of course, that you're not a mum. You had to channel both Shonali and Aditi's story. But Farhan, as a parent, does a story like this just feel urgent and relevant? And is that your process? I mean, do you kind of, dip in and think, what if? I mean,
Well, and you don't really think what if,
Right.
but I mean, when I remember
do you
when
have
I
a
was,
deeper empathy because one is
no,
a
of
parent?
course. I mean, losing a child like Shonali also just mentioned. I mean, it just seems completely against the natural order of things, which is one. It's something that is unimaginable. You know, you don't. I mean, no one will ever think that it's going to happen to
Right.
them. And I mean, there was a very it was an incident that had happened when my younger one was just about a year old, where she was very unwell and suddenly diagnosed with some kind of an intestinal issue. And the doctor saw the x-ray and said, listen, take her immediately to the hospital and get this surgery done, otherwise it could be fatal. And Aduna and me put her in the car and we were taking her. It was the longest drive of my life. And I was trying to call up people and tell them that I'm going to the hospital. I couldn't speak, you know. And I was like, imagine living with this.
Right.
When I was like reading that script, I'm like, imagine living with the fact that this could happen at any point.
Right.
You know, and how do you find then that strength within yourself,
Right.
the grace, you know, the dignity, to be able to say, okay, listen, let me put my personal feelings aside and give this person this amazing life
Right.
while they're here.
Right.
And so all these things did come into play when I was reading it. So on that level, of course, being a parent did play a role. But it's not the what if it happened. It's not.
Right, right,
your mind
right.
doesn't go there.
Go there, sure.
It doesn't go there. But I mean, you empathize with the people when you're reading it, 100%.
Right. Priyanka, this is like you've been saying, and correctly so, this is going to be seen as the first film she's made in here at home after 3 years. Does that feel like a lot of pressure? And and are you sort of curious to see how that goes down and how sort of your fans respond and people that have been who love you and have been tracking your work?
I, as an artist, I guess, you can just do your best work.
Right.
After that, every film has its own
Sure.
destiny, and I would be hopeful that the kind of love and support that I've always got from people who want to watch me, would like and appreciate my work. But I don't put myself through that.
Sure.
Of like wondering what it'll be like, because then I'd be judging me. And this is the best work I've done. Every film, I try to up myself.
Sure.
Every time I go to set, I put the pressure on myself to be a better performer. But outside of that, I'm also aware now, almost 20 years in the business, that I'm also aware of the fact that it's not in your hands.
Right.
It's like art is subjective and everyone's going to decide if this is their piece of art.
How does your experience now as being a global citizen, someone who's worked in the West, someone who lives in the West now, do you feel like that has in any way changed you as a person that you bring on a set? I mean, do you feel like it makes you a different artist? And did you feel that at all because you've worked with her both as director and as co-star?
Now as somebody who's being produced by her.
That's right. She's one of the producers.
Our tables turned.
Correct. Yeah, she's the boss. She's one of the bosses, right.
Usually he's my boss in
Right.
many senses.
No, see, more people should mention that. They always ask me, like,
Correct.
you've directed Priyanka and you've acted with her.
Yeah.
So now I'm also in a film that's being co-produced by her.
Right.
So that's another step
Correct.
that's happened, and I feel very happy about that. But sorry, you may answer.
No,
that.
you've been part of my growth from like the beginning. One of my first big films was given to me by Farhan, and I think like I don't know if it's changed me, because the process of acting and the process of film set is the same wherever you go. There's still the director who demands an excellent performance. There's still a producer who wants to be done on time. So you have like the same kind of crazy. You still have like people watching you when you're performing. So I don't think that's changed me. Yes, maybe my ability or my tastes in a way of the kind of cinema that I want to see and make has evolved, because I'm seeing cinema from all around the world so much more. I'm exposed to
Yeah.
it so much more. So the kind of films that I want to be a part of is my own version of something which has changed. But I guess that happens with experience anyway. So that's the only thing I feel, but otherwise, no, not really.
Yeah, also, I think, I mean, it's an interesting time now because I think there's there's a new emerging bravado of ideas.
It's true.
You know, which is happening.
Right.
And that's a nice
It almost
curve,
feels like anything that feels safe is not it's not interesting
No one
anymore.
is watching.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. And that curve is such a nice curve to be a part of right now.
Great.
Right.
You
What
know,
an
where
amazing-
people are willing to take risks and tell stories that maybe 5-6 years ago we'll be like, "Kaun dekhega?"
Right. Shonali, do you find yourself in a very different place then? You know, I mean, you made Amu, you made even Margarita with the Straw came at a time when the sort of landscape was still changing. Now it feels. I mean, do you feel sort of vindicated in that sense? Was this
No,
an
I feel
easier?
like Alice in Wonderland because I'm like, because firstly I said I'm not giving the script, please. As he said, they had to pursue me because I was like, nobody's going to make the kind of scripts I make, I write.
Right.
I was going ahead. Nilesh was producing it. We were making it. It had won the prize in Talent as the best script.
Yeah.
We were going ahead with another Margarita with a Straw,
Right.
and I'm proud of those films being like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, Bollywood will not touch me. They had to really, Malvika had to insist and extract the script. Even then, I'm not expecting, you know, when Sid called me and said he would do it, I couldn't believe. It's just been an unreal, they have a line, pinch me. I'm just like, please pinch me, because the whole time I was like, somebody pinch me. I can't believe this is happening.
But you know, I'm going to ask you something, and I know they're sitting right here, but I'm going to
so
ask you something, and I'm hoping you'll still be able to say if there is something to be said.
I can say anything in front
Does a
of them.
film change? I mean, this is a film you imagine to be another indie film like your own, like the previous ones. Does it change when you attach mainstream stars to it? Big, you know, it doesn't get more Bollywood than these guys, or a big Bollywood producer. Does the fabric of the film change, and in any way at all?
So you'll watch that and judge it.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
one thing I was really clear that I can't change myself as a filmmaker of making authentic,
Right.
honest cinema, and my demands of my actors that they have to really go to deep places, especially in a role like this.
Yeah.
To be honest, if there was not a thing of money, like if you asked me who
Yeah.
do I want to cast,
Right.
so same with Margarita, like it's like I would have not wanted any other A-list star even to play. Kalki was the right person
Right.
for that role. You know, I
Yeah.
auditioned, and I think for me, if you even ask me, you can have any actor,
Sure.
any actor. I would still have chosen Farhan and Priyanka, and I directed them as actors and not as stars. Having said that, I was terrified to direct them.
Right.
Firstly, because he's a director and he's directed her.
Right,
Like
right,
that
right.
just finished
Of
me.
course,
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. She was so terrified of that.
Obviously, because he's a director whose
Right.
work I love.
Yeah, and
Plus,
a
he's
good
directed
director, correct.
Priyanka. Plus, she's done many films.
You're sort of the outsider
Like,
here,
this is
right.
a terrifying experience, terrifying. So Sid in that for me was massive. Like
Sure.
the reason this has just been a joyride for me is because I had Sid as a producer, and he just empowered me.
Right.
You know, really empowered me. And we talked so much about women in cinema and women directors, and I really found that I needed to be empowered, and he empowered me to get over even these fears, even
Right.
with them. You know, and just like before when Priyanka was coming, and I'd already had a great meeting with her, but still we are going to start off and we're going to start the workshops, and I was nervous, and I remember I was in the car and Sid was, just be yourself.
Right.
Like don't dial yourself down.
Sure.
Just be you still. Like be you. This is a Shonali Bose film.
Right.
And that was very encouraging. And as I got to know them better, like they trusted me, and that's enormous. Like all you really want is your actors' trust.
Right.
That's what good directing is.
Right.
If your actors can trust you, and if you can form, it's an umbilical cord between you and the actors. If
Yeah.
you can form that between them, it's that emotional relationship. If you can form,
Yeah.
then the cinema is what you want it to be. So I'm really proud to say that what they have done in this film is what is my dream.
Right.
Is my dream that I would want for my
Lovely.
script.
You know, I hear what you're saying, because I asked you that because I see the trailer, and again, I haven't seen the film, I see the trailer, and what struck me, and I think before one sees the trailer and before you have any first impression of film, you think it's, you know, it's Shonali who comes from a different world working with mainstream stars, and you sort of, because it's happened traditionally where, you know, it ends up becoming more the star's film than the director's film, and that wasn't the case. You felt like these two play every people, you know. I mean, the emphasis is not on this priestess of high fashion who's, you know, it is,
Wow.
they look like real people.
Thanks.
They look like, they look like, so I hear what you're saying. But was that important? And you really, this is finally, to all four of you, what was important about, I mean, when you take on a film like this, I imagine those are things that you're battling as well, that you don't want to bring the image of who you are, and Priyanka, you have a strong image. I mean, people love you, you're on billboards all over the world now. Farhan, you're someone that people know in you know, various capacities. What was important to each of you going in, and do you feel like, having now watched the film at Toronto and otherwise, do you feel like you've achieved that?
That's always what I strive for. I mean, with all my characters, like I said, I never play me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to play me if I had to. The joy of being an actor, I think, and it's in the word, is to be able to strip everything that you are and to take on a personality of someone else, to be able to take from the paper and create something in between action and cut that is unique to what I can bring to the table. And that's my favorite part about the job that I have, is to be able to take something which is her vision,
Right.
her and Nilesh's writing, and give her something where she stands up and is like, yeah, that was exactly what I envisioned. That's my job. I'm a conduit of her vision, right? We as actors, unless you're writing it like yourself, which Farhan does for most of the films he makes, we are just a vessel. And there's such a joy in being able to immerse myself into being someone completely new. And having played all of these different characters over the years, that's the best part for me.
I think for me, as a film, to have been able to bring this sort of talent together was
Are
more
you
than
saying
one
we're
could have
cool?
asked for. Yeah.
Are we cool?
Because we've worked together on many films, and I mean, I will tell you that, I mean, we talk about global icon and you know, sort of juggling so many things, but when she was doing Barfi, she was playing Jhilmil.
Correct.
And that was a character that was a really hard one to do.
It is.
But
That's one of
she'd
the
be
best
coming in
performances,
between 5-7 different things, having meetings in a van, and she'd land up on set and she was
That's
that
right. She's a
character.
multitasker.
So the ability to do that, and do that with you know, complete conviction and be in the moment, I always knew would be fine, and which is why the fact that we had to shoot across many months, and you know, it wasn't really a tight shoot. It was a shoot that was spread across multiple continents, multiple you know, time periods in their lives. They were both able to just immerse themselves in the characters at that moment, and to have someone like Farhan in the film, who one is, you know, respected for all the hats that he's worn all through, and is genuinely one of my favorite male actors.
Sure.
To have Pritam, to have, you know, to have the lyrics being done by Gulzar Saab, to have, you know, Nilesh and Shonali write this beautiful script, to have Juhi help with the dialogues. I mean, it's really a wonderful team that's come together to make this. And I think when we were in Toronto and watching the film, I don't want to give too much away. It's just that you hear laughter, and that's something that we're used to hearing, and we heard a lot of it. But you hear emotion as well. And when you're in an auditorium with more than 1,000 people and you're actually feeling that emotion,
2000.
that's rare.
The Roy Thompson Hall.
That's rare. Yeah. She's doing a fact check on you while I'm into this whole.
Not underselling this. She's not going to allow you to undersell this.
1,783.
Probably
86 to be precise, including us.
He watched it for the first time.
Oh,
and
at Toronto.
he
Oh,
was
yeah.
sitting next to me and he cried. He
That is
cried.
true.
It was
But
beautiful.
you know, for me in this, I think the most important thing was, I completely agree with everything Sid just said about the crew. I think it was the team that's come together is phenomenal on this
I mean,
film.
they're the best of the best of the best.
It really is. And I mean, when like, see, it starts again when you read the script, then you know that Sid, Ronnie are backing this. So they always kind of will put everything behind what they believe in. So you're kind of secure with that. You know, then Shonali is directing it. She will want to make the film that she wants to make, you know, so you're secure with that. You know, Priyanka's on board doing this film, co-producing this film. She's going to give an amazing performance, you're sure of that. So you feel very, very comfortable getting into it. And I think then the big task is just really like to be honest with it.
Right.
I think that's the big thing. You know, like in every scene to not try and find some way to perform it.
Correct.
You
Like
know,
not
just
overthink.
because it's all there. Honestly, it's
on-
all on paper. All you have to just go there is like just feel it and just be in the moment and do it. And Shonali is there, sensitive enough to tell you whether you're, you know, like doing it, whether you're straying away from the parameters that we've created for this character or not, and just kind of go with the flow, you know, and just be as honest. And I think that was the greatest challenge. And for me in TIFF, actually, apart from everything else, of course, it was very overwhelming to see how the people reacted to the film, to watch it for the first time with everybody who's present here as well. I felt so happy for the Chaudhary family,
Right.
you know, who were also there.
I was going to ask, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I felt so happy for them because, I mean, they're talking about such a difficult time in their life.
Yeah.
And they've shared things that are like, I mean, people don't talk about these things publicly, you know.
Right.
They don't. I mean, you're talking about all this stuff about things that you've had with each other.
Yeah.
You know, him suspecting that she had an affair with somebody else.
And these
you
are
know,
all,
like
every scene is
all-
real.
It's all
Right,
real.
right.
You know, to like kind of put all this out there and then have people understand it. You know, in that volume of number, understand it, stand up, applaud you
Right.
for the courage that you have shown. You know, in one, of course, for what you went through, and just him being able to put it out,
out there, right.
and like let us learn something.
Right.
You know, from you. It was just an amazing, amazing feeling.
Shonali,
She
so-
said that
yeah.
I feel Aisha's reborn today.
I was going to ask you, I mean, was that the response that you were most terrified about or most...
Absolutely, but I showed them before Toronto,
Sure.
obviously. But and the biggest thing was they had come to the office and they wanted to see the death day, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to see
Yeah.
the death day?" And their son Ishan was also there because he lives in America. So and they were like, "All three of us are here and we need to see it." So they were in there and I was outside and I was just so scared, like
Right.
because did I get it right?
Yeah.
And they came out and they just hugged me and cried and they loved it. And for me, that was the biggest thing because how that the day the daughter died, which is a very special scene for me. I love it. And
Right.
it was a difficult day for all the actors to shoot, but that getting that perfect and them just feeling this is perfect. This is how we told it to you and we love it.
Right.
That day was my biggest reward from them.
Right. Well, thank you. Looking forward to watching the film. Cannot wait. And really, thank you for telling stories that are important. Thank you for telling stories that are that sort of will help us just get through life and get through a hard life, actually, the hard world. Thank
We're
you. And
excited
looking
for you
forward
to
to
see it.
Cannot wait to
Thanks,
watch. Thank you
Rajeev.
so much. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All the best. Thank you.